Hi, I'm Greg Pape, and I'm going to read from my book, Animal Time, published by Accents Press, Lexington, Kentucky. And I'd like to thank my son Clay for drawing this lovely rooster on the cover. And I'd like to thank Katerina Stoikova for believing in the book and publishing it. And I'm just going to read straight through. I'm not sure how long this will take, but the book is out of print and we want to make the poems available. First poem is Cave. On a wooded hill in San Rafael, not far from the house, was a small cave where the earth was damp, the rock walls cool and rough, and there were green scents of moss and mint. It was a wonder and a shelter to look out from. The ancestors of my young bones would sit down quietly there and gaze out of my eyes into the leaves and branches sifting the sunlight. If someone spoke, it was a bird or a voice too far off to make out the words. Two encounters. 1. Buffalo Trace. Stars glitter across black pastures, gleam and shine in the eyes of buffalo. How many stars ride the dark dome of a buffalo's eye? How many buffalo breathe the scents of grass and river mist, starlight glinting in the frost on their dense curled coats, on flecks of mica riding their hooves, as they move in clans and gather along the trace that leads to the shoals and shallows of the crossing. Is the river of the Milky Way their map? What calls them? Why, when they come to the two canoes by the river, do they jump over the first where a man sleeps and smash the second with their hooves until it splinters and bloodies the four bones of their legs? Why do they spare him? 2. Bird in hand. Cold, still, sunlit hour, December in the Bitterroot. The sun was about to let the Bitterroots rise up in front of it. The moon was rising over Kentucky, shining on the river where the buffalo used to cross, easing up the east slopes of the sapphires. Chickadees flew back and forth from the apple tree to the feeder, picking up sunflower seeds. One flitted across my head twice, thanking me maybe for filling the feeder. Up in the bare branches, the birds picked open the seeds. One chickadee was looking at me. I made my chickadee sound, psh, psh, took a handful of seeds from the bucket and held out my palm, flat and still. The bird landed on my middle fingertips. I felt the cleaving, the delicate cleaving of its small clawed feet. It looked into my eyes, hopped into my palm, and took a single seed, then flew back to a branch in the apple tree. Ah, chickadee. Now that was something. Spring Storm. This is in the Bitterroot Valley in Montana, where I have a part-time home. Spring Storm, a pause in the light in birdsong. The weightless end of an hour falls. A storm blows in over the Bitterroots. Wind pushes flurries into the silvery valley light, finding voice in bare limbs of cottonwoods, already budding, waving, humming low notes under the green brushes of pines. All down the valley, doors are closing. All down the valley, horses are turning east as a backlit curtain of snow closes on the southern vista. One gray and black bear paw Appaloosa on a fenced half-acre runs tight circles in the dirt, throwing its head, shaking its mane, rocking forward, cocking its spotted haunches, kicking the teeth out of the wind. This is also set in Montana. This is porcupine dozing. Little Velcro-like seeds of hound's tongue in the soft gray underfur, and the black-based golden quills lightly trembling like a clump of stiff grass, and the black eyelids closed on the black eyes dozing or playing dead in the grass beside the refuge trail. Young, dark, inside-out pincushion, be careful. The dogs are coming, dragging people on leashes. Things could get snappy. Some dad might test his shoe leather against the stilled bush of your wintry defenses. Some dad's dachshund, all day pent up, might come grinning, following his nose right up your rear quills. Then, as to human kindness and animal cuteness, all bets are off. Why think now of the Siberian tigers pacing a small space behind a glass wall in the vast foyer of a Las Vegas casino? Or the one with a coat of snow and shadow, tracked, darted, and loaded in a crate, its power conscripted to sell tires on television. Your bundled body in quiet camouflage needs the right background in which to disappear. We should lift you with our minds back into the pine tree and let you sleep. We should bow to you at a distance, honoring the peculiar earth spirit you are. We should pet you with our hands in our pockets. Dog. Come back, his master calls, breathless to the dog. The wind blows his voice away. Away goes the dog. I tried in dreams to find you, conjured your touch, your scent, wandering like a lost dog. They carried away what they could as the waters rose. No room in the truck for the dog. Bogalusa to Baghdad, Juarez to Jerusalem. Who feeds the nameless dog? God is great. God is small. Open the envelope. Pet the dog. This is called Lair and Deer, and Lair is short for Larry, my little brother who had cerebral palsy. On the porch at Wawona, he would sit in his wheelchair and watch the deer. And he spoke with his clear eyes and his palsied body. Did you see Ginger today? Ginger was a doe. Yes, he said, by looking right at you and raising his eyebrows and stiffening his back. Do you want to go inside now? No, he said, pursing his lips and lowering his eyes. For 30 years he was fed with a spoon and a spill-proof cup. Sometimes he would choke and spit up like an infant. When he had to go, someone had to go with him and hold him on the toilet and wipe him clean. Sometimes he would sigh and smile the calmest smile. When he was happy and excited, he would kick his feet and wave his arms like broken flowers. The deer came right up to him and ate the grain scattered at his feet, and sniffed his knees and breathed with him in the early evening. This is for my son Coleman, my older son. It's called Deer in the Garden, and this is a description of what I saw him do one day. He started up the old Ford pickup and drove slowly out the dirt and gravel road, past the fenced garden, where a young white-tailed deer was browsing withered vines in the fall sun. As the truck went by, the deer startled and began throwing itself at the fence, although the gate across the way was open. He watched in the rearview mirror as the deer threw itself again and again against the fence, ramming with head and shoulder, confused, terrified, pitting all its strength against the wire fence. It was too much. He stopped the truck and ran back to the garden through the gate and, abandoned to his task, in a series of quick moves, threw his arms around the wild deer, lifted and turned it in the air as their wide eyes met, then heaved it toward the gate. He drew a deep breath and stared as the deer leapt free and bounded off across the grass, its white tail pointed straight up at the sky. Birdhouse. Patches of blue whirring through a gray cloud ceiling. A flicker hammers a hole between rafters, its small brain humming with the nesting instinct. From his hole near the roofline, he or she plucks pink tufts of newly installed insulation. I climb the tall ladder, look and reach into the dark for eggs or birds, then nail an inch-thick board over the hole. Cease and desist. Go hammer a snag by the river. Go drill a cottonwood. This is no birdhouse. It's a temple to the written word, a sacred space to shut out noise and haste, a place to lean long, deciphering secret maps in wood grain, to trace the heart's startling mazes, to face down demons in memory's dark alleys, to salvage some grace. Peace, bird, leave it be. But no, next day a new hole appears. I nail another board, hoping to discourage this feathered wood borer who drums its presence on the metal breaker box and flies its shrill cry from tree to tree in spite of me. Another day, another hole with flicker-sized beak marks, through two boards that prove no barrier to this bird's will. How they do it, I don't know, but starlings drive the flicker away and claim the hole and plucked out space between the rafters for their nest. What can I do now but adjust my hold, reimagine the temple, accept the starling as totem, because today I hear, at the approach of the iridescent black mother, the fierce churring of the brood. This next poem it's called Swale, and it's about, it's a true story about a famous racehorse named Swale, and it's set, of course, here in the Kentucky bluegrass. Swale, a low place of land, an area of grass in a marsh. From Old Norse, svalar, cool, akin to Old English, swellen, to burn, ignite. A place a horse would be drawn to, a low, cool place in a meadow surrounded by willows, morning shadows. Or, in Montana, a place a moose would turn to a wallow. But this is Kentucky, 1981, the rolling pastures of the bluegrass, and the colts gone missing from the band of yearlings he ran with, outran all morning, as if ignited, burning. How could you lose such a horse? Remember the story of Ferdinand the Bull? Remember the bee that stung him? A totem of peace among the cork trees of Spain, turned to El Toro Fiero in an instant by pain, then pacified again by the smell of flowers. This horse and that bull have more in common than pasture and meadow. They have the whole weird human world, bullfights and horse racing. Through heavy mist that settled in low places in the pasture, they searched for the horse. Not easy to lose a horse at Claiborne Farm, and it wasn't long before they found him. They heard him before they saw him, lying down there in the fog, sound asleep, loudly snoring. That's why for a while, before they named him Swale, they called him Foghorn. Walking in fog. The path leads into a place that emanates from the gray mist and dissolves back into it. A small world of frosted willows, honking geese, pale yellow grass. Patches of old snow give off a new light. It's like walking into a space new made by brushstrokes on rice paper. Cattails pointing up or leaning slightly as if listening. Reed canary grass sifting the light. A pheasant appears, a silhouette running on a ridge, then vanishes into a screen of brush. A small flock of ducks, announced by whirring wing beats, appears and dissolves. Gravel crunch and pad of footsteps. A badger hole rimmed with ice. White, sun-bleached skull of a marten or a mink. The banded feather of a hen pheasant. Small things loom up out of the backlit mist like the talismans they are. In this place that appears as the world dissolves. A pool of mountain water. We're back in Montana. No, this is in Arizona. This took place in Arizona, northern Arizona. A pool of mountain water. And in my imagination, of course. If I were a still pool of mountain water, below a wall of rock with small fissures from which a cluster of magenta bee balm bloomed, the hummingbird who stopped in the air just inches from my face, its wings a blur, its iridescent green body shimmering in sunlight, and looked into my eyes, turning its head slowly to get a good look, and saying a brief phrase or question in hummingbird clearly to me, as if I should understand and answer. I would think it saw its own reflection in the water and marveled a moment at this other, though I am no hummingbird or pool of mountain water. Or suppose I am all that I see, all that I imagine, starting with a pool of mountain water, a pool in a stream cupped between boulders so the water has slowed nearly to stillness and become a dance floor for water striders, a mirror for a bear, a hiker, or a hovering hummingbird. Green moss on a rock, a bleached white bone. When no one, critter or writer, is there to define a reflection, the water still holds the weather, the changing sky. I loved being there when the hummingbird came by. It seemed to have no fear when it stopped in the air and looked me intelligently in the eye. As for bears, it's best to observe them from a distance. Moment, Grand Canyon, also in Arizona at the Grand Canyon. We have just arrived. We're standing on the south rim, looking down, feeling our bodies slip and fall away from us, past the cliff face, into that deep space below. We feel light and small now, our equilibrium shaken as we watch the raven riding thermals, its sleek black feathers shining in the sun as it glides just above the rim, then drops down again. Out across the chasm, Shiva's temple rises above a moat of mist and seems to float. Someone aims a camera. Someone puts his hand in his pocket to hold on to his keys. We breathe in green scents of pine, cedar, warm red sandstone. Breaking the spell, cutting up the stillness with its loud blades, a helicopter rises out of the depths of the canyon. We don't know whether to laugh or bow to the burro rising before us in a sling. At the small animal auction, this is at the Ravalli County Fair in the Bitterroot Valley in Montana, where I have bidded on and purchased many chickens. At the small animal auction, eyes dark and shiny with the light of the distant sun, just as a glint on the gin clear water of a riffle back up in the wilderness flashes that same light, the light that makes everything grow, and the origins of which we probe and debate, but none deny. When I saw those eyes shining beneath the brilliant red flesh combs, and imagined stroking the sleek black feathers of those two hens, one held in each arm of the girl, wearing a glittering tiara, blue sash that said princess over her white 4-H shirt, big belt buckle, blue jeans and boots. And the auctioneer said, "I hear 15, give me 16, do I hear 16? I raised my hand, and he said, sold, and they were mine, so to speak, and I belonged to them." Now you've got these chickens. Should you name them? The next poem is called Naming the Chickens. Let's call the rooster Threads, for his lushly layered red and gold-tinged feathers, for also he is third in a distinguished line of red roosters, Big Red, Little Big Red, and Threads. Let's call the first among the hens America, for she is of old South American lineage, kept by the Oricana deep in the forests, away from the chickens of the imperialist invaders. Let's call her cousin Canada, for she is descendant of those raised to weather the cold north winters. Let's call the big golden-laced Wyandotte, and why not, Big Dot. Her small friend, whose ancestors hailed from Sussex, we'll call Speckles, for the spots of light on her red and gunmetal blue feathers. Let's watch out for the one who, even now, nose lifted, stands at the mouth of the den, sorting those intriguing scents. Let's call the chickens by name and wish them well. And let's put a hex on the fox. Elegy for Big Red. You were a bastard hatched in Nebraska, shipped to Montana in a box with dozens of others, wide-eyed in yellow fluff. Boxes stacked 6 feet high in the feed store, filled with a motherless, peeping din. We bought 2 sacks of feed and got you and 9 others for free, took you home and raised you in a bigger box in the basement, changing your water and feed and the newspapers you soiled and slept on and walked on for weeks, pecking at the black letters, thriving, it seemed, in the light and warmth of a bare bulb. Soon you were a little taller than the others, and we knew we'd get no eggs from you. Through the seasons, your constant concern was your harem of hens. You'd dance on one leg, shimmy a wing, distract a hen with the brilliance of your feathers, then grab her neck in your beak and mount her quickly. Sometimes merely at your approach, the hens would squat down and lift their tails. Sometimes they'd run away squawking in protest. You followed them everywhere, standing tall and vigilant, ever protective of the flock, warding off anything or anyone, crowing at all hours of the day. Once the neighbor's golden retriever carried you off in his teeth when you threw yourself between the hens and his charge. It took months to regrow those long looping tail feathers that shimmered and bounced when you strutted, and you strutted everywhere. I fed and watered you with a stick in my hand to ward you off. Over and over you attacked my legs, from the side or from behind or straight on, throwing yourself with all your might, spearing with those sharp, yellow, horn-hard 3-inch spurs. You drew blood through my blue jeans. I have scars on both legs from your fierce attacks. More than once, in anger, I punted you like a football across the yard. My booted foot broke the spur from your left leg. You learned to lead with your right. You attacked my sons and their friends. You took the fun out of raising chickens. Still, for a couple of sweet years, you strutted among the healthy hens who laid more eggs than we could eat. Every morning at dawn, you greeted the sun, or more likely challenged it. Every minute of every day, you stood between the hens and all the world's dangers. Dogs, cats, foxes, ravens, hawks, owls, weasels, and us humans who put up with your bad behavior and cared for you like one of the family. One by one over the years, the hens died off or were snatched by predators. We ate the eggs we didn't sell. Then there weren't enough to sell. Then there weren't enough to eat. One of the last hens of blue Oricana, broody and determined, hatched 2 chicks, red like you. They are still alive. At dawn, I heard an eerie silence I didn't recognize. And when I went to do my chores, I found you headless in the chicken yard, red feathers strewn in a path from your perch, making it clear whatever predator killed you had to catch you sleeping to do it. I miss you as I never thought I would. Yesterday you were this big, red, fearless, strutting rooster in bright, glistening feathers, crowing wild at the sun. And today you are a silent, headless corpse. Why the rooster calls. Why the rooster calls or cries out lustily, proudly, sadly, depending on how one listens, is one of each day's mysteries. Mostly he guards or watches the hens. Mostly he's courteous and defers as the hens revolve like leaves in an eddy, or scratch the ground for its bounty of worms, grubs, grains fallen from tassels or hands. Alert for wing shadows, weasels, a wrong sway of grasses that signals the fox. He stands attentive, tall, and shakes out his feathers to fearsome his form. Even in leaf shade, the sun is in his eye, and his small heart beats with a pulse continuous from the wild fowl of the Asian forests, where the feathered skins of his ancestors were worn as headdresses by chiefs and shamans. Hatched from the blue moon of his mother, an egg that no one ate, hour by hour, he tends an old fire. His call is its flame. And one last rooster poem here. Sort of elegiac, but also questioning the mystery of their spirit. Rooster song. Threads, the rooster calls vehemently, repeatedly, to whom or what? The sun? Clearly, he means what he cries through his tight cords and open beak. His red pelt of throat and chest feathers rising and falling with the shrill wind of his song. Strains of Coltrane splitting the sax's reed. Often his is the first voice I hear at dawn, a voice different than other roosters' voices. Blind Bob, Big Red, Little Big Red, Wavelength, and Threads, all different cries. Cock-a-doodle-doo won't do to call up their songs. They play different instruments. The young cockerel sounds forlorn as he tries out his song. His pipe's not fully formed. He can't hit the high notes that Threads, the old world chanticleer, belts out lustily to the first light. Once from a bridge above the flooded Santa Cruz River, I saw a rooster perched on the bloated body of a drowned cow. It was hard to tell in the muddy rush if he crowed, and he crowed over and over out of fear or joy. But he went on crowing until he was a speck of red rushing away in the flood, until he was nothing but a small flare of memory lighting up in another rooster's dawn song. Boy and Swan. This is set in Louisville, downtown Louisville, on 4th Street. The swan's webbed feet rest on the shoulders of the naked boy who's just been swimming in the pool below the fountain. The boy is intent on toweling off his wet feet and hardly notices the swan, or else tolerates him like a brother. This is a detail of the fountain to Venus at St. James Court I had forgotten. I have fathered 2 boys of my own since I last walked this old neighborhood in Louisville, where I lived that year in a downstairs apartment on 4th Street, across from Friendly Spirits Liquor. Collards and broccoli greened a small plot off the alley, sustained by rain and passing bass vibes of boombox halos, the amplified heartbeats of ghosts to be walking the streets at all hours. At all hours I bent down over the green lines on yellow paper, jazzing prayers to sax riffs of My Favorite Things or So What. The night air burned with its sense of early times and Butchertown, American Standard, and the gloom-belching stacks of the medical incinerator. Sometimes I could hardly breathe. That was the year Don Hendry and I made a pact to quit smoking, and Schreiner, down from Detroit, wrestled his demon girlfriend raw on the living room rug. I walked everywhere, back and forth from the classroom to the library, to the Speed Museum, to the Glass Galleria, that cathedral of commerce, nodding to the stalwart bronze statue of Lincoln, bowing to the Sisters of the Sacred Heart. Fresh from one of the leather thrones at the Barber College with a $3 haircut graded B-, I strolled up 4th Street to Muhammad Ali Boulevard and sat down with my thoughts on a bench in the golden nimbus of Merton's Revelation, oblivious. Why couldn't I see what he saw? All those people shining like the sun, even me, even you, and the boy, and the swan. This is a little ode to the dipper. The dipper is the little gray bird that bobs up and down on the edge of the water and goes under the water. If you've never seen the dipper, look them up. They're an amazing little bird. We have them in Montana. I don't know if we have them in Kentucky or not. The dipper in winter. Not Ursa Major, whose outer edge points at Polaris, our North Star, or the 7 sisters of the Pleiades, the 6 daughters of Atlas, who shine dark nights for the one who is lost, but the little slate-black river bird, always rocking and bobbing to an inner music at the edges of ice, slick stone, and cold water, the one who flies low and goes down under the surface to see what the fish and the water spirits see, down in the current where sun and stars stream and smooth the hard edges, regrets and fears, all those many-colored flamingos of time and desire asleep in their watery feathers. Cheers, she says, and bobs and dips and disappears. Another poem for the birds. This is entitled Sparrows, and it's set in Flamingo, Florida, which if you're headed down to the Everglades, it's the last stop on the road. It's a little place that after you get to Flamingo, if you want to keep going, you got to get in a boat. Sparrows, gray wash of waves against the seawall, lap and splash of incoming tide, whitecaps, blown wisps, salt spray, a line of black and white skimmers flying low, dipping down and cutting the surface with the red scissors of their bills. This is as far as the road goes. Flamingo. There's a boat launch and crabgrass campground with tables, fire pits, palm trees, and birds everywhere. Gulls, herons, snowy egrets, oyster catchers, and sparrows. The ubiquitous parking lot sparrows of America. I was thinking as I drove through the towns. Now, this warm wind in Flamingo, the sparrow likeness. A blank page. How did that blank page get there? I'm going to have to write a poem and fill that page in. This is called Walking the River Bottom. We're getting close to the end here. Cottonwoods and ponderosa pines harbor porcupines and owls, great-horned, long-eared, saw-whet. Good reasons to look up walking in the river bottom. This close to wilderness, bears, wolves, and mountain lions consider this home range in spite of the highway and the clusters of new houses. Staying alert for an odd sway of grass, a breathing bush, a rustle in the willows is good practice. Today, all the owl trees seem empty of owls. Porcupines are elsewhere, or well disguised as needle clumps high in the pines. Snap of a grasshopper gives the turkeys away. Bowed monks in mottled robes mumbling through the brush. One sentinel posing as a snag keeps watch over the flock as they appear, 4, 5, 9, moving with a slight rocking motion as they forage through high grass and hound's tongue and fade into shadows. Listening for ducks in the slough just behind a line of willows, I hear the willows rustle and a long, dark muzzle appears. Then dark eyes beneath a great rack of antlers. A bull moose steps half out of the willows and stops. Between man and moose, a calm blooms. A tall calm in the willowy green going gold at dusk. Not so far off sounds of trucks, contrails dissolving above the bitterroot, reflected in the stillness of water. The look of the moose listening, then lowering its great head to feed. Moose don't have very good eyesight, but they have a real sensitive smell and hearing, and they're very sensitive to movement. So if you ever run into a moose in the wild, get yourself near a tree and stand still. Don't move, and you can observe the moose. I stood there and watched that moose for a long time, took pictures, and finally he went the other direction, and I went the opposite way. Finch at the window. This is from my partner, Tammy. Finch at the window. Heart says, listen. The finch on the windowsill has committed no crimes, no acts of violence against anyone. Everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. Yes, almost, but not here, now, on the windowsill. Bird who reveled in August dust fluffs her feathers in the snow. Yes, she answers to all the seasons. Everywhere the ceremonies of need persist. Winter can seem cruel, but it's just cold. And this little bird may be 9 parts hunger, but clearly now she is opening a seed with joy. Tracks and traces. Slabs of ice covered with snow, and the tracks of an otter who came ashore and bounded along a curved path for 50 feet and lowered its tail and slid back into the water. It must be fun to be an otter. Farther on, tracks of a couple dozen geese who'd had a meeting on the ice. It must have been cordial. No one stepped in another's tracks. And it must have ended suddenly with them all lifting at once into the air. Wouldn't that be something, to bend your knees, to raise your arms and spread your feathers and pull them down and push off your webbed feet and stretch out your long neck and lift off into the air above the river with a bunch of friends honking and barking and lining up in a pattern that made sense to everyone and seemed to ennoble the air. Well, watch out for your lost brother down there in the tules, calling and calling. Over here, over here. His love is tender and violent and hard to explain. Brother Goose, Sister Otter, forgive us our ways. We'll all sleep together, as Tao Chen said, a bent arm on the pillow, keeping emptiness whole. I go on walking, glancing down to see the path, then up into the trees to see the trees. Owls, maybe, great horned, long-eared, saw-whet, woodpeckers, hairy, downy, pileated, the brown creeper, the snipe, or porcupines, those shy 4-footed cacti of the north woods who gnaw the bark and sweet cambium of the young pines and climb higher than the owl's roost to roll up into a ball of quills and sleep away the cold. Like that old Buddhist monk called Bird's Nest, because he liked to sleep and meditate in the trees. When I saw one, a porcupine, I bow back. When I see one, a porcupine, I bow backwards and gaze a while in porcupine time. Then I walk on, step over a fallen branch, a rock. I walk until the path fades and my steps find their way to a huge, uprooted ponderosa pine. Wind tore loose and lay down, leaving a cleft, a hole I step down into, roots and rootlets still holding, dangling in constellations, the rounded river stones they clung to when the big wind came down through Kootenai Canyon. A time of violence become a place of shelter, part of the story that houses us all. We are not the only animal who thinks, I think, as I walk, following these traces. And I've got 2 more poems here. This is called If Wishes Were. You could walk up any creek or canyon in the Bitterroot watershed. One Horse, Sweeney, Larry, Bass, Brooks, McCullough, Kootenai, Big, Sweathouse, Bear, Fred Burr, Blodgett, Sawtooth, or Roaring Lion, and sit down, feeling a little dizzy maybe, like the nuthatch clinging upside down on the bark of a pine, and make a wish. Before long, you might find yourself wishing for something else. Remember that old song, "Keep Your Eyes on the Prize," and the line about the only chains we need are the chains of these hands holding us together. Somewhere over the rainbow, there's a pot of lottery tickets. I know the chances are slim. One page in a ream, or worse. And the sky is full of what we like to call stars. And if wishes were horses, or a herd of confused elk down from deep snow in the mountains, standing at the edge of the highway, watching us watch them as we speed by, maybe we should just pull over, let things settle down, slow to a slug's pace, and maybe they will cross over to the river as if we hadn't fenced it off, as if the highway meant them no harm. See the way they seem to turn the pasture into an open prairie, and every step they take has built-in dignity and grace. Hold up. Here they come. Hold on. And the last poem is called The Woolly Mammoths. What happened to the woolly mammoths? We ate them and they became us? We had thought that early hunters, after the invention of the atlatl and lethal Clovis spear point, killed off the woolly mammoths, hunted them into extinction, along with the saber-toothed tigers. Even the giant armadillos could have succumbed to the hunter's spear and cunning. Isn't it a wonder the woolly mammoth is much beloved among humans who have never seen one, except in artists' recreations and bones wired together in museums? Those great aunts and uncles of the elephants, with their marvelous tusks and hilly demeanors, still roam the plains and vast interiors of human dreamscapes. Now, from fragments found in dry riverbeds and lines of interstellar dust in the melting glaciers, we've pieced together a new theory of the mammoth's extinction. It wasn't our spears, but meteors, laced with minute diamonds unlike any jewels of Earth, that rain from space and set the land on fire. If we have a picture, if we can smell the earth, if we know hunger, if fire has warmed us, if wind has cooled us, if we have listened to water and considered starlight, we can honor the mammoths still roaming inside us. We can make a story like a bowl from shards. Thank you.